Hi, this is Simon Umstell and welcome to another tutorial for Motion 5. And today we're going to be taking a look at creating this scene. Now there are a few interesting things about this, but the main thing that I wanted to show you was how to create these photorealistic, accurate reflections. So let's get started with this. The first thing I'm going to do is create that spherical glowing object in the middle of the cube. And I'm going to do that in a separate project. So let's set that project up. I want to make it 500 by 500. I'm going to make it 15 seconds long, and I've got a frame rate of 24. What I'm going to do, first of all, is come to generators and bring in caustics, and I'm also going to bring in clouds. So I'll come on, select those. So both of those are in. And then I want to create a circle. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and draw a circle like that. I'm going to come to the inspector, geometry. I'm going to set this circle radius to 200. Then I want to come over to style, set the fill mode to gradient, open up the gradient editor, set the type to radial, set this Y value to 0, and the Y end value to -200. And what I'm going to do is just going to throw away one of these color tabs because we don't need that. Okay, so then I'm going to hold down the Alt or Option key and drag this opacity tab across. So this one I'm going to move all the way to there. This one I'm going to move roughly to about here. This I'm going to move in here. This left-hand one, set the opacity to 0. This right-hand one, also set the opacity to 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate that clouds layer to move it to the back. Let's turn off the other two elements and move that circle to the back as well. So with that clouds layer selected, I'm going to add image mask, and I'm going to use that circle as the image mask like that. So you can see it's created that soft edge out there, and then it's transparent in the middle. Next, I'm going to select my caustics, and I'm going to add a filter, and that's going to be distortion sphere. I'm going to set the radius of that to 190. Let's come to the generator tab for the caustics. Let's set the width and height to 400. Let's set the refraction to 100. Set the brightness all the way up to 50. The size, we're going to go 0.05. Then I want to come to caustics properties, rotation, select that. Add parameter behavior rate. And let's set a rate of -50. And so that rolls gently around like that. Let's turn on these clouds here. Come to the generator. Let's increase the speed to 1. Reduce the horizontal and vertical scale to 16. Open up the gradient editor. Now again, I'm going to throw away that color tab there. And I'm going to make 2 more tabs on the top there for the opacity. So this middle one, I'm going to set its location to 50. This one here, I'm going to set its location to 45. This one here, location to 55. And these outer two, I'm just going to set their opacity down to 0. And I'm just going to grab that sphere filter and copy it onto the clouds. So grab that like that. Also just going to increase the radius of that to 200. And I just want to come back to the clouds generator and just the offset, Y, add parameter behavior rate. Going to set a rate of 0.2. And that will cause the clouds to drift up like that. Then I also want to add another filter to this. So come down to stylize, and I'm going to use crystallize. Set that size to 5. Then I want to take this whole group here, come to filters, color, levels, select alpha, and bring down the white so it's really crunchy like that. And then let's add another filter, glow, glint. Let's reduce the exposure to 0. Let's set the glint size to 1 and the streaks to 2. And I think I'm just going to come to that caustics here and add another color correction to it. So color levels. Again, let's use the alpha and punch through the whites and just clip those blacks away quite a lot. So we're getting something like that. Might also just grab that crystallize filter from the clouds and holding on the Alt or Option key, add that in there as well. So I think looking at that, I've probably slightly overdone this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable that levels. So we're getting something a little bit more subtle. I think that's looking better. We haven't just blown everything out with that. So let's delete that. And now we're ready to render it out. So we're going to come to Share, Export Movie. Let's select ProRes 4444. And I'm going to come to my Renders folder and render it out over the top of the one I've made. Call it Ball. So now we're in a new project, and this is 1920 1080. It's 15 seconds long again and 24 frames a second. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make the room out of our checkerboard room. So I'm going to come to Generators, bring in the checkerboard. And I'm going to come to the inspector. We want to set the width and height of this to 2000. So the width of 2000, height of 1000. And let's set that size to 100. I'm going to come to Properties, open up the rotation, have a negative Y rotation of 90 degrees. And then I'm going to move it over negative 1000 on X. I'm going to duplicate it and move that X position to positive 1000. Duplicate it again. Properties, 0 out the X, come to the Z, negative 1000, and 0 out that Y value. Then let's duplicate this. Command D. We're going to make this 2000 by 2000 so we can use it for the floor and the ceiling. So come to Properties, 0 out the Z position, have an X rotation of 90, and let's move it up to 500 on Y. Duplicate it again, negative 500 to make the floor. So I'm just going to quickly label all these up because we're going to be using them again. And then I'm going to take one of these. Let's take the floor. I'm going to come to Filters, Stylize, and I'm going to grab the Indent filter. I'm going to set the softness to 0.4, the brightness to 0, the ambient to 0, the highlight brightness to 45, and the highlight sharpness to 25. And I'm going to set the light rotation to 0, and the depth I'm going to crank all the way up. And I'm just going to hold down the Alt or Option key and copy that to each of the other layers, like so. And that's looking a little bit more 3D because we've got a little bit of sort of depth shading on those tiles. So now let's build the cube. Let's call that group Room and close it up. So new group, let's grab the rectangle tool, holding on the Shift key, draw a square. Let's center it up. So turn off the fill, turn on the outline. I think I'll have an outline of 10. And then I'm going to use the replicator tool, object to replicate. And let's set it to line. Let's turn on 3D. Let's set the start X to negative 200, the end X to positive 200, number of points 2. Open up the angle, set the Y value to 90. Right, so now we can duplicate this. So right click, duplicate, and then Let's rotate it through 90 degrees on Y. And then we want another one. Right click, duplicate. Again, let's rotate it 90 degrees on Z. Now, you'll notice this doesn't quite line up, and that's because in my haste I forgot to set the size of the rectangle. So let's set that to 400 square. And now we're good to go. Now we can add in our ball object. So I'm going to make a new group for this. Object, new group. I'm going to go to import and import that from there. And it sits in the middle of our box, looking like that. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a light, turn everything to 3D, like that. Now this group here with the ball in it and this group here with the box, but want both of these not to be lit, so I'm going to turn the shading off like that. And the same thing with that ball group, turn the shading off, and then they are basically self-illuminated and they're nice and bright. Just going to give a little bit of coloration to that light, make it a little bit blue, so we've got an ambient blue color like that. And I'm also going to now add a camera, so add a camera like that. And I want to add a behavior to that camera just to show you something. So if we enable sweep, you'll see that the ball now doesn't look like a ball. It looks like what it is, which is a flat circle. So what we need to do is we need to add a behavior to it. So we'll come to behaviors, basic motion, point at, and we'll get it to point at the camera. So we'll drag the camera into that. And now as the camera moves around, you'll see that the ball is looking like a ball because it stays facing the camera. So let's duplicate that ball object. Ball, right click, duplicate. And we're going to just move this out to 500 on X. It's also got that point at behavior, which is what we want. Let's reduce the scale down to 30 because this is going to be our little ball flying around the other one. So to get it to fly around, we're going to come to behaviors, simulation, orbit around. And we're going to orbit around that main ball, so we'll drag that into the source well there. We want to turn off Y because we don't want it going up and down. We want to turn on Z. And now you'll see that that's flying around our main ball. Okay, so let's just give it a bit of coloration. So this is ball large. This is ball smaller. And the large one, let's add a color correction, color levels. Let's come to the red and bring that slider down. Come to the green, also bring that slider down, not quite so much like that. Come back to the RGB, push the RGB a little bit. And let's do the same thing to the other one. So color levels. And this time we're going to take the blue and just reduce the blue so we've got a yellow version. So we want our box to tumble. So I'm going to take this group here and I'm going to, well, let's select the rotation, add parameter behavior rate, and let's set transform rotation all, and let's have a rate of 10. And now that's rotating equally on all axes. It'll do for now. What I did in my demo was actually to have a separate rate for each one, so it behaves a little bit differently, but that's good enough for this. Okay, so now we want to add some glow because this is really not looking great. In fact, I'm going to take this box group and I'm going to add it into that other group there, just so we're dealing with a single group and not getting confused. Let's call it objects. And what we want to do is want to duplicate it. So right click, duplicate. And to this group, we're going to add a Gaussian blur. And we're going to have 3 extra instances of this. So I'm going to duplicate that 3 times using Command D, Command D, Command D, Command D. So 4 altogether. This first amount I'm going to set to 64. This one to 128. This one I'm going to set to 256, not making the terrible mistake I made the last time I did this. This one I'm going to set to 512. Let's come to the group blending mode and set that to linear dodge. And what I want to do is add a color correction to this, so color levels. Again, let's use alpha, and let's bring down the white. So what I need to do is I need to adjust these mix values of these blurs. So the second blur, I'm going to set the mix value to 60, this next one to 30, this next one to 15. And you see how that gives us this nice wide blur, but it's a little bit tighter. Now, I made a mistake here with that levels on the large ball, so we're losing all that nice detail. So there I'd crunched the whites too much there. And I think what I'm going to do is take the blue value, sorry, not the blue value, the green value, reduce that down a lot, get that red value right down. Just don't want this to be too bright, otherwise, as you can see, it's going to, we might even take down the blue value as well, actually, just a bit. So something like that. In fact, I might even remove that blur there. Let's just not push those whites quite so much. Maybe do something like that. Ideally, we want a separate blur for that box. And what I'm going to do, I think, is just take that box itself, this group here, which is inside that glow group, and I'm going to just go add a basic glow from the apple glow. It's pretty rubbish, but it'll do just to help us out there, to give us a bit more glow on that box. Still really not happy about that. I think maybe just to change that blend mode to add. That's looking better. There you go. Always just play with the blend modes and just see which one is going to work better. Obviously, you've got lots of parameters that you need to sort of interact with. I think that's looking a lot better. What I might also do is come in and make that original box layer there, give that a blur, just to soften off that sharpness, making it look like it's glowing a bit more. Maybe even go for 20. And another thing we can do just to knock it back is to come to its opacity, and let's set that down to about 50. Just sits in a bit better. Okay, so now let's go for the fancy stuff. I'm going to call this group glow. Actually, you know what I'm going to do first of all? I'm going to add a light that follows this little ball here. So I'm going to duplicate the existing light, and I'm going to change its color to yellow. I'm going to set its intensity up to 500, and let's increase the fall off to, yeah, that 10 will do. So what I want to do is I want to link it to that ball. So I'm going to come to properties, click on the position there, add parameter behavior link. I'm going to dive in here and just grab that ball out of there, drag it into the source well, and now you can see that that ball is casting a little bit of yellow light as it goes around, and that's a little bit better. What I might even do is take this main light here, duplicate it, and increase the fall off to 15, increase the intensity to 500, just so we've got a bit more of a sense of that illuminating the floor and the ceiling. Okay, so how are we going to create these reflections? We want them to be completely photorealistic, obviously. So we could just, for example, come to the room and turn on the reflection for the room. And that's just hopeless. We can't possibly work with that. I've almost never been able to make this work, the Apple reflection. So it's always worth doing it a different way. So the different way we're going to do it is to use our camera and get it to look from each of the surfaces towards our objects. So I'm going to turn off my room because we don't want that included in this exercise. I'm going to, first of all, use the left-hand view. So first of all, I want to set the angle of view for the camera to 1. You'll notice that if I set it to 0, that object here doesn't point directly at the camera. Some little bug in there. So we need to set the angle of view to 1 degree. So it's effectively an orthogonal view, what the wall is seeing effectively. Now let's look at the left-hand wall view. So that's -90 on the camera. And all we need to do now is just render that out. So share, export movie. Let's use 444, might as well. And in our renders folder, I'm going to render the left view there. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through for each of the surfaces and we're going to render them out. So if we do the right hand wall, that's positive 90 on Y. Let's render that out. Probably need to just sit with you through all of this because it's probably not going to take that long. I can speed up the bits that need to be sped up. And let's now use the top view. So that's negative 90 for the top. Export that out. It's a little bit laborious, but it's very, very much worth the effort because it's going to look nice, I think. So positive 90 will give us the view from the floor. So I'm going to call that bottom in this instance. And there's only one more to do after this, and that's the back. So 0 out the X, and we need to go for 180 on Y, so we're looking at it from behind. So now, render out the back. Hope you're enjoying this as much as I am. Okay, now let's reset our camera. I want an angle of view of 75 for this scene because I want a nice dramatic look to it. Turn back on our room there. I need to reset the camera, that's why. We're looking at it from behind the room. Okay, so here we are, back with our original camera. Turn on that sweep behavior. And let's make a new group. So come up here, object new group. Let's import everything we've just rendered. So that's all of my renders apart from the bull, which we've already used. Import all of those. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is to set this group to 3D. So right click, make that 3D. We just want to now position all these things in their correct places. So the back is going to be negative 1000 on Z, obviously. The bottom, we need to rotate through 90 degrees, positive 90 on X, and then set it to minus 499 on Y. Always best to just stay 1 pixel wide with things like this, just in case there's intersections you don't want. So the top, again, let's rotate it through negative 90 on X and positive 499 for its Y position. Hope you can see this coming together now. The right-hand render, we are going to set to positive 90 on Y and then positive 999 on X. And finally, the left-hand wall, we are going to set to negative 90 on Y rotation and negative 999 on its X position. So now if we have a look at how that's working, you can see that those reflections are correct. They're not looking terribly good at the moment because we need to have quite a bit more work on it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to blur them. So filters, blur, Gaussian blur, apply that to that left one there. I think we want to go for something like 100. And let's just copy that to each of the others. So using the Alt or Option key just to drag that onto all 5 instances. Now, the cunning part of this is that we're going to use an image mask on each of these. So let's first of all select the left, right click, add image mask, and we're going to use the room layers for that. So left to left. So the left hand wall is going to go into the image mask well there, and we need to set the source channel to luminance. And we need to remember to turn back on the group once we've used it to add to the source well. So now you can see that we've now got a faint reflection in there. If we want to increase the intensity of that reflection, we can select the image mask, come to Filters, Color, Levels, and here we just need to use the RGB and punch up the white value like that. So I'm going to do the same thing for each of the layers, but first of all, I'm going to call this group Reflection, and I want to move it back behind my objects like that. Open it back up again. And what I'm going to do is copy that image mask onto each of these, and then I'll swap out the relevant source images. So the back needs to come from the back like that. Again, turn it on. Bottom needs to come from floor, like that. Remember to turn the floor back on again. Where we top needs to come from ceiling. So remember to turn the ceiling back on again. Right, the last one, needs to come from right. Turn the right-hand side back on again. And now I think you can see that that's looking really pretty good. And that's more or less our effect done. You'll want to make sure to render it with best, otherwise you'll get horrible and noisy effect off the indent filter. But that's essentially how to build this. One little tiny thing that I did, and I quite liked the look of it, and you might want to do the same. If you have a look at the floor here, what I did was I came to stylize, add noise, and just want a very, very small amount of this. So set that mix value to 10 so you can see it. And I'm going to just zoom in so we can get a feel for this. You can see it just adds a little bit of texture. And if I move that down behind the indent, obviously increases that, the indent drives that. So we can really reduce that down like that. Maybe reduce the amount of the noise down to 0.1, for example. I hope you can see that it just gives an effect that those tiles are not completely flat. And if you do that to each one, I just think it makes it look less plasticky and a little bit more organic. But of course you'll want to remember to turn off the auto animate button, otherwise you'll get a very odd looking floor indeed. Okay, thanks very much indeed for watching, and hope to see you again another time.